Christophe here, who's Director and Chief of Staff for the Merck Group, 53,000 employees, 350 years old. That's the company, I hasten to add, and not, there's not some miraculous thing that we're learning here today. Over 60 countries, and looking particularly at the sort of technology, healthcare, life science area. And interestingly, for this discussion, Christophe isn't an expert on supply chain or an IT specialist. So we're going to get a different perspective. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Christophe's got to say. So if you could join me in welcoming Christophe to the stage. Christophe. Thank you.
So good morning. It's already afternoon. I try to walk you through our journey towards self-driving supply chain at Merck before we all faint out of starving. So I try to be crisp a little bit. You may wonder, to start with, why a guy who is not an expert in logistics and neither an expert in digital is addressing this topic to you. And I'd like to go back to what Sean was saying about recruiting from somewhere else. What we actually went through in Merck was a supply crisis. And just to set up the context, in the healthcare industry, a crisis means 95% service level. What I mean by that is our service level exigency is 99%. Why? Because we are delivering drugs in oncology to patients. So we cannot afford saying to a patient, sorry guy, you have to wait for a couple of more weeks because we messed up with our supply chain. Okay? So we had a tricky situation, and our CEO, and at that time the Vice President of Supply Chain, who is now, interestingly, the CIO, decided to set up a group of people with a change mindset, a different background, and I was included in this group. This is why I'm here to address this topic with you today. How we approached it as a team. Basically, we didn't discuss technology because we decided that technology is just an enabler, right? So what we decided to do, we defined a vision. We said, what does it take to improve the situation? And the situation has to be improved by improving the demand. Very classical approach, right? Improving the demand, and what we set as an objective is to automatically predict the demand. So that means we needed to build up capabilities and align as a team on how to do statistical forecasting. It means that we needed to have some predictive forecasting, and we needed to find the right experts, the right vendors, the right technology to do that, knowing that we had lots of different systems, lots of these different ERPs. So we needed to do that in a system-agnostic way. Then the supply would follow. For the supply, we wanted to have it proactively prescribed. It means that we needed to have some autonomy and a system built around the supply to be able to do this. We needed to have also discussions around the modeling. How is that going to work? And how this would capture the IoT. And then the logistics. We wanted to have it personalized, collaborative, and efficient. And I think that leads us well into why you do these things and what are you trying to achieve. Are you trying to improve your cost? Are you trying to reduce your inventory? Or are you trying to improve the service? And I think one of the key aspects for us was first to improve the service, and this is actually what comes first. How did we approach that? Well, the what now? We approached it in 4 steps. So as you can see here, from a situation where the data was scattered, the processes were suboptimal, people were not talking to each other, we decided to as a first step, to have a better descriptive situation before we could move to a predictive one, and then think about the prescriptive one, and finally going to the self-driving situation. What I'm trying to say here is that there is no way in our experience you can rush it. There is not off-the-shelf software or vendor or whatever that will plug into your systems and suddenly make it happen that you have a self-driving supply chain. And the first step, actually, is the more important one. So as we were working together with the teams, we first nailed down having an IBP dashboard and an IBP process, which was allowing everyone to discuss one number coming from one source of data with one source of truth, and this being done coming from different systems. And here, the skills that are required, I'll come to that later, are very important. You need to have data engineers, you need to have people, and you need to discuss the IBP system, the IBP process with your teams in a very cross-functional way. This is very, very important. Again, the tools, I'd just like to come back to the tools because that's a question we got very often. There are lots of tools available to do dashboards, right? So the tools don't matter. I think here our experience again is don't look for the off-the-shelf tool, sit together, discuss the process, and the tool then will follow. The data is critical. Nothing happens with good data, sufficient data. When I mean good data, is clean data, harmonized data, and this is a lot of work. Then, having this data all together, you can move to the next step, which is the predictive, the forward-looking forecasting. And again, this is all about having the right methods. Then you have, here you start to have data scientists, you start having machine learning, and what we realize tracking in different segments of SKUs is that the machine learning error was actually consistently lower than the human error. What it entails here is change management at the end of the day. It's people management. Because what you're telling to your forecasters is, hey guys, the machine is doing better than you. And this is a big shift to be implemented in the teams. So again, the change management here and the people aspect is extremely important. Then only once you have the predictive, you can go to the prescriptive supply. So again, you're not talking about only a good forecasting, a better forecasting than humans. You're having a system that tells you, this is what's happening today, this is how you addressed it in the past, this was the results, and we suggest you apply this or that change into your demand forecasting and into your planning. And again, I insist a bit heavily on that, but this is very important, and you mentioned it, and Alex as well. It's all about people at the end of the day, again. Because you need to convince the forecasters to follow the advice of a machine. And you know what? They all believe they have a better idea than what needs to be done. So again, this step here is very much around the people. The systems are there. They exist. There are different options. I think here what is really important is to have the right scientists, and I'm thinking about the data scientists or the data engineers that understand the business. Data engineers, you find a lot. Data scientists are much more difficult to find, the very, very good ones. And then the very, very good ones who understand your business behind the scene are very, 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 very few. So here the constraint is not the tool, the constraint is to find the right guys and to work together with the teams. Finally, the next step, and the self-driving, I mean, the example we just had from DHL, is basically to have a system that is machine to machine, that drives, quote unquote, without people, connected and outside in, real time, always on, never stops, doesn't go to bed, thinking, and autonomous. There are a few constraints here on our side, which are actually regulatory constraints. Because when we get to this level in the healthcare industry, there is the notion of accountability. So if something goes wrong, who is accountable? Because the regulators will be asking us, who made the decision? And if we are saying, well, the machine did the decision, that's not going to be enough. So I think the implications of that from a regulatory standpoint in healthcare, but in your different areas, in terms of who is accountable, who is responsible, what is the governance around these things, once you decide the machine is basically prescribing and then autonomously running your business, are extremely important, and that's not so easy. So, I didn't mention, sorry, I'm just looking at the slide, I didn't mention something which is extremely important as well, is that all of that needs to be as well connected to the outside world and your suppliers and the different systems and all that stuff. So it needs to be very, very encompassing, and that's why it's a so cross-functional effort. So how we did it basically is working on people, processes, and tools. And I put the tools in the last box, because there are tools, but the real magic in there is having the right people to shape them, design them, and the processes that go together and how the teams operate. By the way, in the initial phase of this project, which is now live, meaning the project, not the initial phase, we had a very, very cross-functional team. So we basically gathered people from marketing, from sales, commercial, supply chain, manufacturing, regulatory, finance, IT. So again, that was a large change project and very, very cross-functional. I think this is one of the how to do things, the critical success factors is really to have the different stakeholders around the table. So in terms of people, I mean, at the different step, I'm not going to go into all the details of the methodology, but basically, the important message here is that you need different skill sets and different expertise at the different steps. So from the data architects, from the data engineers, then the data scientists, and ultimately no one, because the system is self-driving, right? But you need different skills at the different steps. The impact as well is very, very important to monitor and anticipate. And I think as well in terms of managing the senior management of the company. Because the focus, we got a lot of questions when we presented that project and that success in different forums, is what is the cost aspect? How much money did you save? Well, the reality is that the cost aspect comes at the end. The reality is that first you improve the service level. And again, you need to massage a lot senior management. Senior management endorsement, by the way, is extremely important because this is by nature a very cross-functional exercise. So you need to have, and it costs money. So you need to have senior management endorsement, but you need to manage this senior management in terms of expectations. And again, how do you measure the impact and what kind of impact can be expected at the different stages is extremely important to clarify upfront. In terms of timing now, our experience was that it took us over a year to do step one. And it's good that we took the time to do it. First, it took more time than I think usually it can be done because we did it for the first time, so we learned. And we were probably a little bit sub-efficient in the way we delivered it. But also we realized that the underlying complexity of harmonizing the data, putting all the data into one place, aligning people on the understanding they have of the data, how we're going to structure the dashboard and all these things is extremely important. So I think it's extremely valuable to take the time to do the right things. Again, we got some questions from peers or from people from other industry asking us, where can we find the software to implement self-driving supply chain? So, and there is no software, it's know-how. It's really about know-how. It's the ability to understand how it works, what are the different steps, aligning people together. So there is no magic in that. So where is the value? Again, I think I alluded to that. First you describe, and what you get is a better service level. And we actually at Merck managed to catch up, so we answered the request of our CEO, hopefully, and improve the service level, so it's worth it, it works. The cash and the inventory levels, we see an impact. And the cost aspect is coming late. However, it's a little bit complex because on the cost aspect as well, you're looking for, and we alluded to that in the previous presentations, you're going to have to retrain people. You're going to have to change the way they work, and some of them will have to change jobs because some of the things that were done before, when you get to the level of having a fully self-driving, of course, will change. So the cost aspect is definitely here. Putting a number on it is not so easy because it's multifactorial. You're still in the investment phase, and you're changing, rotating people. Basically, you're changing your model, and you're not necessarily comparing like to like. So closing remarks on my side is technology is an enabler, only an enabler. It accelerates, but again, it's not a standalone solution. It's not an off-the-shelf solution. Take the time and invest a lot in change management and in people management. This is, for us, it has been critical success factors. And stay alert, because the problem is it takes up to 2 years, maybe 3 years to get there. And nowadays, in 3 years, lots of things happen. So you're getting to the end, and the environment has changed already. There are new solutions, new vendors, new softwares, etc. So I think investing the time to stay alert, participating to conferences, well done, guys, and things like that are very, very important because it's very difficult to stay up to speed. Let me add a fourth point, which is there is no magic bullet, there is no off-the-shelf software, and there is no magical external consultancy who knows it all. There are very, very few companies who will be able to help you to do that. Because you need to have a mix of change management, people management, field expertise, healthcare expertise in our environment, logistics, IT, and all that stuff. And it's difficult to find the right guys to do that. So it's very much an internal effort. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks very much, Christophe.
Thank you.
Very interesting there that you know, another part of the theme that comes back is about people, how important people are in that. And that's interesting that that message has come through. We'll go over to the questions. So if we switch over, and we'll try and deal with as many of these as we can and try and keep ourselves on track. Okay. Why is it okay to have 99% success rate on drug delivery when John Lewis is disappointed with their delivery success rate drops below 99.8? Somebody from John Lewis in the audience, perhaps. I mean, you can pick that up if you want. There's also here, which came up in the last session, which was about 3D printing. Is that going to have an influence on the pharmaceuticals, delivery? What's your sense of those?
Well, we're in the field of oncology and neurology. Some of our drugs are liquids, actually injectables. So I don't think there will be a major impact in this area. But there are already existing technologies to print pills. There are in the healthcare industry also discussions around customization of pills, which means that you could customize the dosage of each and every tablet for specific patients, and you could use 3D printing in this area. To my knowledge, this is not a priority in our R&D business, but yes, this is a topic for the healthcare as well.
And do you think that's going to be driven? One of the other points there on that particular question was about legislation. How much of that is going to be either held back by or driven by legislation, would you think?
Well, it's going to be held back because the legislation and the pace of and I think the pace of the changes in this area from regulators, the laws, governments, etc., security agencies, FDA, MEA, etc., the pace of change in this area is much slower than the technology changes. So it's definitely a limitation. I think one way to address that is to team up. It's not very easy. Of course, with agencies, but this is definitely a limitation on our side. I think industry by industry, it's probably very, very different. Our industry is extremely regulated, and the life cycle is extremely long. So product development is about 10 years, from chemicals to human testing and registration, and 1 billion investment. So it's extremely slow. Now, the time we have to have a return is getting shorter and shorter. We are talking about years still. So we have a little bit more time, I think. You see what I'm saying? The pace of change is slower by nature of the business and induced by regulators as well.
Okay, good. There's a question here from Thomas. Thank you, Thomas, for that. How did you resolve the decision accountability issue?
A short answer is collectively. I mean, the way we did it is by involving the people. You mean at the self-driving stage, right? Well, we are getting there. Honestly, we use the self-driving piece in the area where we don't see an impact from this prescriptive. So the system can prescribe some decisions which would not be subject to scrutiny in case there is a problem. For the others, we still need to work with regulators and find a way to address that.
Okay, good.
Okay. But internally, coming back to your question, I think internally the best approach to agree on what is the accountability is really having an involvement from the different stakeholders at each and every step and discuss what is the impact of the changes on the governance, which includes, at some stage, to your point, having the regulatory affairs involved.
I mean, I can see we've just had another one picking up that point about 3D printing, which is obviously if the printing technology is there to enable us to print drugs already today, does that mean that, going back to actually some of the points we had earlier, that if logistics companies or logistic areas can be used to print products, does that mean that they may also become a focus for production as well? Taking the point there from Peter.
I think one of the limitations is not the technology again. The limitation to 3D printing and customization are the regulatory nature of what we do. Because, producing drugs is a very highly scrutinized process. And there is no regulatory frame, to my knowledge, to producing drugs with printers. So this implies huge consequences in terms of validating the process, finding the right machine, ensuring consistency of the quality, and a very deep dialogue with the regulators.
Okay, good. We've got a couple of interesting ones there. Could self-driving drug delivery halt an epidemic or provide mass-scale vaccinations in remote areas of the world? Is that something where you could see that technology potentially being used in a positive way?
Conceptually, yes. Practically, ensuring quality of the end product consistency and coping with the regulatory environment, I think is a very, very challenging thing to do. Okay, good.
Another question there about issues surrounding the delivery of drugs, self-certification, and the point there that's being made is, are we handing the keys over to robots or cobots or, you know?
Yes. We have some projects actually, and one of them is live of delivering in remote areas. So this is what we call an access to health problem, to deliver in remote areas using drones in Africa. I think it's in Kenya actually, we are running that. So yes, there are opportunities there. And I think there are opportunities actually looking at my friends from DHL and others to team up and find solutions for the patients, yes.
Okay, good. Interesting point coming up, which, and it's right that we've stressed about the importance of people and the different creative skills that people have. But here we've got, you know, is that just to make us feel better about ourselves? So that we're not all terribly miserable before lunch, or is it actually that is not going to make the huge changes that people are expecting? So, just looking, I guess, from your planning, are you expecting that to be able to make you reduce the number of staff you have and replace? I mean, I guess as we had from Alex there, that there'll be more robot manufacturing those. Are you expecting to be able to reduce your staff, or are you expecting staff to come in different areas? What's your sense of that as the running that business?
I think the impact will be both. The truth, I mean, in which magnitude, I don't know, to be very, very honest with you. I think this will definitely change some of the content of the jobs. So quantitatively, probably some reduction, and that will have an impact on the cost. Qualitatively, we will have less planners doing forecasting on Excel based on historical data, but we will need more people in the data science area and in other more value-add areas. That's my qualitative guess on that.
Okay, good. I'm going to introduce our countdown element, which is that we've now got 44 seconds before lunch. So in that, what I'd like to say is, so we'll continue this theme. That's the closing of the sort of theme, looking at technology and brands. We're going to move on to looking at people with Benedict Allen. So if those of you who don't know Benedict Allen, who's one of the leading explorers, very, very interesting session that we've coming up. I've had a preview of it. I don't know whether he'll mention it, but one of the things that he had to do very early on was actually eat his dog, sadly, in order to stay alive in one of his... I'm hoping that's not going to be necessary at lunch for everybody here. But then we've also got Shadi Mir, who's over here from the US, who's come over from Ann Arbor. Also, when we're looking then at solutions from his company, Pedestrian, so a lot of very interesting topics to pick up in the afternoon. But for now, what I'd like to say is, if you could join me in thanking yourselves and also thanking Christophe, that would be great. And it's lunchtime. Thank you, everybody. Great.